So I've always contended, and I think it's probably lost me a few job interviews along the way, that fundraising is too important to be left to the fundraisers. By which I mean it's a whole organisational task, and I think that's increasingly so. But particularly trustees. I used to work in an organisation, I won't tell you which one it is, where I wasn't allowed to speak to the trustees, so the board basically, or the advisory board. And in fact, the chief executive hadn't even bothered to check out who was on the advisory board. And one of them was a gentleman by the name of George Soros, who, if you haven't heard of him, is one of the richest men in the world. And they hadn't bothered to check out who he was. So there was me as a fundraiser championing at the bit, going, let me at them. But trustee involvement in fundraising is something that's absolutely crucial. And Matthew and I were talking about this just last week. I wondered if you had any advice to young fundraisers in terms of how they can work with trustees for maximum effect.
It's very difficult, I think, for you to be able to necessarily change the dead blanket of complacency that sometimes sits at the top of organisations in their trustee board. And when I've been doing trustee training courses, I go around the room saying, who's got people who have been on the board more than 10 years, 15, 20, 25? I've got up to 31 now, actually, 31 the other day, 31 years as a trustee. So it's very difficult for you to change that, and it's essential that we find ways of being able to change from the top, because an organisational culture, in the end, comes from the top. And that means the trustees and the chief executive. Now, once the trustees do get engaged, then don't be afraid to ask them to do things for you. Don't be afraid to ask what they can do to help you, because many of them behave like seagulls, as you know. Many of them behave like seagulls because they fly in, make a mess, and then fly out again. And those are the worst sorts of trustees, whereas the best trustees in arts organisations are those that are willing to take responsibility for something and help with something. It doesn't always mean that they have to milk their network of contacts, but being able to say, look, would you be able to get, if you know so-and-so, would you be able to get a 30-minute meeting, if not with me, then with the director? And the trustee may be very happy to do that, because they won't make the ask themselves. But I believe quite fundamentally that every trustee should give what according to their means, and that can be kept confidential what they give. And I believe every one of them should be engaged in fundraising, and it should be right at the top of the agenda of any board meeting.
Some very, very good advice there. We were talking beforehand about artists' involvement in fundraising as well. You've had a pretty good experience, from what I can tell, with the London Symphony Orchestra when you worked there.
Yeah, so I was program director at London Symphony Orchestra for a while, and what really impressed me there is that it was absolutely in the DNA and the culture of that organisation, that it was part of the job not just to play brilliantly on stage, but that you were also part of the fundraising team. And I cannot remember a time as development director, bearing in mind that there would be 3 to 4 concerts a week for LSO, that we had any complaints from players about meeting donors. That's just what they expected to do, and they did it in the half-time interval and also afterwards as well. So pretty impressive.
It's wonderful. I have to say, it wasn't my experience at CBN, where they were all far, far, far too stressed to speak to sponsors beforehand or at the interval, but they